Hello, family members. Hope you're having a great day today. Well, Kimmy and I are here to talk to you today. Well, I'll do most of the talking. She'll probably just do some sniffing, maybe a little licking. You never know. But about Herbert Hoover. Well, not really. Kind of, but not really. I've been seeing a lot of comparisons to the current administration to Hoover's administration. And, knowing where Hoover's administration goes, how it ends with the Great Depression, you kind of start thinking, how would I survive in the Great Depression? I mean, there were a lot of things that people did to make it during the Depression. I've heard stories about people planting like crops along the railroad for extra place to try to get some food or something that you could sell, get a little bit of money. There's the making your own clothes thing, and there's a lot of things that people had to do during the Great Depression that I don't think are really all that common as far as like skills go these days. And I don't know, I think I'd probably do okay if there was a Great Depression, if I could still have air conditioning. My biggest thing is I have extreme heat intolerance. And so, there's probably very few places that wouldn't at some point in the year be too hot for me to tolerate without some sort of air conditioning. So, I don't know, that'd probably be my limiting factor right there. But, I grew up on not a working farm, but just like a family farm. My dad had a big old garden. So, I know how to hoe and how to plant and how to harvest, common stuff like tomatoes and beans and potatoes and onions and lettuce, carrots, the kind of like normal garden stuff. Broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce, cabbage. I said lettuce before, didn't I? Well, anyway, pumpkins. You really can't stop pumpkins from growing. That's been my experience anyway. Like right now in my backyard, there are several tomato plants. Broccoli is growing, lettuce. There were bean plants, but it's the dry season. I don't think they really handled it very well. Mulberries. We got a tangerine tree out front, we have a little bit of stuff like that here. And it wouldn't be hard to expand necessarily as long as we still had access to things like water and electricity, basically. I think that would be the main things. But, people don't think about how much we depend on dairy and meat and animal products that would be really hard to obtain if you needed to generate them yourself rather than buy them. I know probably a lot of people are thinking chickens. So I'll just get a bunch of chickens and then I can raise them up and kill them and eat them and also have eggs and everything. Chickens are a lot of work. You got to protect them from predators. They make a lot of mess. You got to feed them. It's a lot of work to pluck a chicken. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but it's not pleasant. Honestly, I've seen this done out in the country before, and it's kind of weird to me. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. These people would just have hutches and hutches of different rabbits. big old, big rabbits. And then they would harvest them for meat. Like, we always talk about replicating like rabbits, right? Well, that would be a really good thing to have, you know? Get yourself some rabbits, let them reproduce. You'll probably be able to have some actual meat in your diet that way. Another thing that would be really good to have would be a goat. Goats are better as far as you don't have to protect them so much from predators. They're really good at like eating anything that's available. They're not that picky, you know. You can get milk from a goat, which is always very nice. You know, that's not necessarily going to be something you can harvest that often, but when you do, you're going to get a pretty good amount of meat. You can make some leather, you know, have some like other types of products. You know, you learn how to use other parts of the animal than just the meat, of course. I mean, which you would have to if it's the Great Depression again, you know, if we make America a Great Depression again. You know, learn how to boil bones to be able to like make stock and gelatin and, you know, like products, you know, learn how to can things for yourself. I know a lot of people who can do that kind of stuff because I grew up in West Virginia. But I think there's probably quite a lot of people in our country that have no idea how to do a lot of those things. And, you know, they may not have the space to do any of those things. Raise a goat, raise some, you know, rabbits or chickens or whatever they choose to raise. You know, little, you know, urban gardens and whatnot. That's not always going to be an option. And it's hard to imagine what would happen if we had like a big 1920s style stock crash in this modern time, you know. A lot of the things that really went wrong during the Great Depression were related to like communication and related to like knowledge. Like, for example, you know, the Dust Bowl. I don't know if you were made to read the Grapes of Wrath in school like I was and hated it like I did. But it does give you a very detailed account of the Dust Bowl and, you know, these unsustainable farming practices that were engaged in that made it impossible for people to be able to live in places they were able to live in previously. And so then they're, of course, all like trying to travel to other places and putting strain on the communities that they come to that are already strained, don't have a lot of resources to begin with. I don't know. It's going to be a really tough thing if that happens. I hope we don't really see that level of economic decline or economic disruption, because doing that with, I mean, there's more than 300 million people just in the United States, you know? There's billions of people worldwide. A global recession, I don't know. It would be extremely destabilizing in a lot of ways. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff that can lead to, like, civil wars, you know, mass uprisings, things that can be ultimately result in maybe better conditions, you know, theoretically in the future, but are going to mean a lot of pain and suffering for people in the present, you know. And the most vulnerable are always the most harmed by war. it's so funny to me when you see these like manosphere people that are like, oh well, men go off and fight the wars, and so they suffer more under war, and it's like, no, that's not true. When war is something that is happening in a territory, the most vulnerable people are hurt the most. Look at Ukraine. Look at Gaza. We're talking about children, the elderly, disabled, sick. Anyone who is not perfectly fit is going to be that much more likely to die as a result of the conditions that wars create. War isn't like it is in the movies. People think that the the way that people are killed in war is through guns or bombs or tanks or cannons or whatever. And yes, those things do kill some people, but what kills like far more people are disease and starvation and lack of shelter, lack of basic health care availability. Imagine having a heart attack in the middle of a war zone. Imagine getting cancer in the middle of a war zone. Like, there's just when you look back, like when you look back at World War One, and how many guys just died of illness in the trenches, and how many people starved or had nothing once their cities were bombed to rubble. That's far more devastating than, a few soldiers dying on a battlefield, although that is tragic too. But because there's some sort of assumed glory attached to that soldier and his actions, his sacrifice is overvalued. And the sacrifices of the general population that lose their freedom, that lose their comfortable life, that must live on stress and strife and with reduced resources for however long the conflict endures, that's heavy. That's the cost of war that people don't want to acknowledge. And the cost of a Great Depression is going to be similar. The people who are going to be hurt the most are going to be the most vulnerable. People like me who have chronic illness, people who have physical disabilities, people who have intellectual disabilities, people who are, recovering from illness like cancer, like I was not that long ago. People who are just financially unstable already, for any number of reasons. We have so many people who are living paycheck to paycheck that don't have basically any sort of safety net. And that's pretty terrifying, when you think about the fact that it could be very, very soon that there could be a stock market crash and a lot of people losing their jobs all at once. And if that were to happen, with this many people living paycheck to paycheck, we're going to have a lot of people who are in dire poverty in a matter of weeks, maybe less. And that's going to ripple everywhere, you know. Our economy is so interdependent. You know, we have like landlords, obviously, you know, people who are not going to get their rent, and companies that are not going to get their rent. You know, grocery stores aren't going to be able to sell items. Local stores aren't going to be able to sell items because people won't have the money to buy them. You know, tax base is going to shrink. There's just so many broad effects, and there won't be a single person that won't feel it on some level. But the pain, the real pain, is going to be for the people on the bottom. And a lot of us won't survive. You know, if for some reason it gets to like kind of post-apocalyptic kind of stuff and I lose power and I don't have air conditioning, I would die. I would get heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and die. I just can't handle heat. That's part of my illness, you know, like and when I was in my 20s, I lived in a place where we didn't have central air. We had a window unit in the other bedroom and a window unit in the living room, and there was no window unit in my room. And I was able to tolerate that. But I can't now. And I'm not the only person that's like that is unable to handle that kind of stuff, so oh, family members. I think that, you know, all of the medications that I take, that I need to be able to function. You know, I was talking to my therapist yesterday about spoons, the spoons theory. And she is like, how many spoons do you have at the beginning of the day? And each activity costs spoons, right? And I was like, you know, I don't start out the day with any spoons at all. I have to smoke my belly into submission. And after like maybe 3 or 4 joints, then I might be able to like semi-function for a while. And I don't necessarily want to have to roll and smoke and everything on camera. But sometimes, in order to be able to function long enough to get a video out, here we are. Although I guess it gives you something to look at it. But it's, you know, what are we going to do if our cell phones don't work, our internet doesn't work, or we can't pay our cell phone bill, you know? People have a lot of recurring bills that they just sort of take for granted. And, you know, what are you going to do when you can't pay that because you don't have a job and you can't find a job? So nobody has jobs, you know? I mean, in the Great Depression, I think there was like 25% unemployment. Can you even imagine? Like, 1 percentage point difference makes, like, so much... Like, the effect on the economy is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it just, kind of, like, gets you when you see things like that. When you... All I can say is that it's going to be really hard not to want to, like, get into doomsday prepping. I feel like maybe I ought to go buy a few buckets of those, like, ready meals. All you have to do is add water or whatever, just in case all of society collapses. I mean, right now I'm living off my parents, and my parents are living a lot off of investments and like Social Security and retirement and all of these things They were public school teachers. If the whole government falls apart, what's going to happen there? I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And that's a nerve-wracking place to be. Honestly, you want to have security, especially when it comes to like financial stuff. This instability is going to cause a recession. Period. That's just going to happen. There's no way that economic growth isn't going to slow because markets hate instability. Now, there are things that Trump likes to do that markets do like tax cuts and reducing regulations and crap like that. But tariffs are taxes. And they are ultimately paid by the consumer, the local consumer here in the United States. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to pay all those extra taxes. And Americans have a tendency to try to find ways to get out of paying ridiculous, unfair taxation. I'd kind of bet on this in that regard. Sorry about that. So I saw Rachel Maddow on Seth Meyers, and I'm been a little anti-MSNBC for a bit here. Just the way they've constantly downplayed the atrocities that are going on in Gaza, and the way they treated Joy Reid and Mehdi Hassan, and yeah. But Rachel Maddow, she's real. She's smart. She knows a lot. She talks to people who are actually involved in world events. Cory Booker got done talking and was the focus of the media, and the first person he speaks to is Rachel Maddow. She's got some clout and connections and networking, and so she's worth listening to, I believe. And she said that it's really the everyday, ordinary Americans that are reacting appropriately to the moment. They're stepping up and actually treating what's going on right now like the emergency that it is. She highlighted people going to town halls, protesting outside of government agencies or outside of Tesla dealerships. It's kind of heartwarming to see that. I've had people in my life that were in no way political a year ago that are actually either going to actual protests actively, or at least planning to, and talking about and being interested in politics. I don't know why I can't get this joint to stay lit. I hope you'll forgive me. I don't mean to be a bad smoker, but I am. Anyway, she said the people who aren't reacting appropriately are generally the people in Washington, in government, the Democrats. And she said that Cory Booker had told her that his constituents basically demanded that he do what he did. that you go out there and speak for over a day to disrupt Senate business. Even though, it's a symbolic thing, it's a gesture. It's not necessarily going to achieve that much on its own. It's at least a signal that this is extraordinary times and extraordinary action is going to be necessary. Ugh. I want everyone to do something. I'm so frustrated that I can't do something, If I could get someone that could take me to a protest, maybe I could go, but it would have to be the exact right conditions for me to be even physically handle it. So I'm kind of stuck doing this, screaming into the void, being like, "Hey, everyone, this is important. We need to pay attention to this," But the thing is, I think people are. I think people are paying attention to this in ways that they never did before. I have seen people taking action and treating it like the potential dire emergency that we are watching slowly unfold. Because I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, what the emergency is going to look like. Maybe it won't be a financial crisis. Nah, we're going to have some sort of financial crisis. That's just unavoidable. But it might not be like the Great Depression. It may be more like the 2008 recession, which was pretty awful in and of itself. But, it's better than the Great Depression. I will take the Great Recession over the Great Depression, although I'd rather have neither. I mean, there are so many things that are right on the cusp of becoming a major disaster. Infrastructure stuff, transportation stuff, now that for some reason they don't want to have air traffic controllers. I mean, let me tell you something. People who work in transportation are already understaffed and underpaid. There is no job cutting that you can do there that is not literally dangerous. And we're going to see the effects of that. And, getting rid of regulators is going to mean that it's going to be harder to catch infrastructure problems before they kill somebody. And we'll have maybe more bridge collapses or other types of infrastructure issues. Building collapses. Obviously, another pandemic is always a possibility. There's so many different ways. If we piss off Canada too much and they cut off electricity, we might have a hard time providing electricity to all of our people in this country. Can you imagine having just rolling blackouts be part of your normal everyday life? That's how it is in some countries. That could be us. Sorry. Itchy throat. You know how it goes. Anyway, so I pretty much think I've made my point, but I just want to say it's probably not necessary to become a doomsday prepper. But, you probably don't want to skimp on having an emergency preparedness kit. Now, here in Florida, we do that anyway. I mean, every time that it's going to be the hurricane season, you make sure you have water, you got, your generator ready, you have, some food and stuff that you can eat without, power. There's all the things that you would need if you got cut off from power or being able to leave your home for a few days for whatever reason. That's probably not a bad idea in any circumstance, I mean, like a freak storm, a tornado could hit your town and you could need that without you knowing it. I mean, there's always a chance. So general emergency preparedness, generally a good idea. Keeping a good first aid kit on hand and, all the standard medicines and stuff on hand. That's probably a good thing to do. And I'm not going to discourage you from, learning how to make your own little victory garden in your yard or whatever, or raise rabbits for meat or whatnot. But I don't think that we're necessarily at that point yet. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully we won't have MAGA depression, but kind of looks like it's possible. That's kind of terrifying. So, Kimmy, do you want to say goodbye to the people? You want to say bye-bye? You want to say bye-bye? Oh, she's like, you can't see my face, though. Oh, there's my face. There's my face. It's Kimmy. She's a wiggle worm, isn't she? All right, family members. I love you. Take care of yourself. Bye.